What's up guys, today I'm upgrading this small pool pump filter to a larger version with a built-in sand filter, and I'm going to show you how to do it step by step, so let's go. So the pool that I have is one of these Intex above ground pools that you can put together at any time when summer comes around. Now, you might have seen this pool before in my DIY solar pool heater, so go check that video out as well. But what I did was purchase one of these eBay filters. Now, it comes with a sand filter as well as the pump, and how it works is it pumps the water from the pool through into the sand filter, cleaning the water and putting it back into the pool again. One of the things I like about this setup is that it has the strainer on the front for all the leaves. Now, the actual pump itself has a timer built into it, so all you have to do is turn the dials, which is pretty cool. Instead of having external setup on the electronics, you've got a pressure gauge on the sand filter itself, and all the adapters, everything comes in the box. So what I'm going to do first is just pull everything out of the box, make sure everything's in there, and show you guys a bit of a setup of how it will look. Make sure you're looking through the manual at the same time when you're setting this up. This video is good to show you physically how to set it up, but make sure you read the manual because it does help. So inside the actual sand filter itself is some hoses, so make sure you take those out first. Now, the sand filter actually sits next to the pump, and the pump just slots on top of this little sand filter holder, and then your sand filter, when it goes on top, there's a little groove that you'll see on the side of the sand filter and where it fits into place. So this is what it looks like all together. You've got the hose that runs all the way up into the pump. From the pump it goes into the top of the sand filter, and then on the side we've got the pressure gauge. On the left hand side we've got where the water goes to the pool, and then the right hand side was where the drain was. So the hose then goes off to the side, and there's a selection on the top where we can choose between the normal operation, draining the pool, backwashing, all these different options which are in the manual as well that explain each of those. So now we got to take it outside to where the pool is. The main reason that I actually purchased this filter is that the smaller one wasn't actually cleaning out enough of the dirt, and after we had a bit of a dirt storm come through, it filled the pool up with a bit of junk. So as you can see, there's the small one there. So let's get to replacing it. The first thing you want to do is actually get the tube from out of the sand filter. Now, as you can see, it all screws together. I'm going to put that into the piece at the bottom. Now, all those small pieces in the bottom also screw up as well, so just make sure everything's tight. And as you saw before, there was a maximum and minimum amount of the sand that you need to actually put into this sand filter. So once you tighten everything up on the inside, you don't want to try and do it after you've got the sand in there, because you'll have to tip the sand back out. Now, there's this top piece that goes onto the top of the sand filter that stops all the sand going into that tube. You don't want it in the tube, you want it in around the outside. So get your sand that is appropriate for this sand filter. Now make sure that when you're pouring the sand in, you're actually getting it evenly around inside the actual filter, and you can sometimes jiggle it around, shake it a little bit. Just make sure not to get it in the tube in the top, but just keep going until you get to in between the minimum and maximum levels that you should be getting. Now that that's full, we're going to put the top on it. So as you can see, there's the washer that goes on the end of the actual outlets. Once you put the washer on, you can then put the cap on the D side, which is the drain, because we're not using that just yet. So tighten that up. Now what I'm doing is actually switching it across to the X, which actually closes the valve, because I don't want water to be going in any direction while we're trying to set this up if I do connect anything up. So now we have to screw this top onto the rest of the sand filter. There's screws on either side that undo, and it is a clamp that actually clamps onto the top of it. So make sure you actually remove this sand cover piece, and then we're going to attach on the top and screw it up. Now I actually made a bit of a mistake here of not placing it in the right place, but that's right, I fix it later on. So just to show you for comparison between the old fittings and the new fittings, they're actually very similar. They've got the same thread size. That's just the internal component which is a little bit bigger, so which is easier to swap them over instead of pulling the pool apart and draining all the water. Even the hoses that we're replacing are actually very similar size, so we can actually shift them across and have all the right fittings on it. And as you can see here, the fittings just push onto the end of the hose, and then you screw the cap up onto that fitting, and then it holds without leaking any water through. So before you start putting everything together, you really want to work out where everything's going to sit and how you're going to run the hoses through, because you don't want to try and do it after you've got everything connected, so then you'll have to disconnect and water will go everywhere. Ideally you would do this before you're actually setting the pool up, so you have everything in the right place. And as before, I'm just putting the sand filter holder underneath the pump in that slot, and then we're going to put the sand filter on top of that holder. So as with all the components, we have a washer that goes on the end of each of the hoses and the fittings attachments. So we've got one there on the top of the pump, and we're going to place one on the inside of the sand filter selector, and all we're going to do is screw those up. Now this is where I figured I've made a mistake here by screwing the top on and not allowing for the hose to actually reach on the pump. So what I'm going to have to do is actually unscrew it, twist the top of the sand filter, get it lined up, and then screw it back up again. Something to think of when you try it yourself. Now that that's done, I'm going to install the gasket on the end of the outlet of the sand filter, screw the actual hose that'll pump back into the pool. Then we'll have to work out how we're going to switch the hoses. Now in this case, what I've done is grab the end of one of the caps or the fittings, stuff it with plastic, and that stops any of the water actually flowing back through out the hose. So when I screw that on the inside of the pool, I can actually remove the hose and not have to worry about much water coming out. So I've just kind of set this up only because of the way that I'm doing it with the existing system still there. You wouldn't have to worry about this if you didn't have the pool full of water. But basically I've got the hoses ready to go. I unscrew the existing hose and then quickly switch over the two hoses, and hopefully you don't lose much water. As you can see, I'm holding the hose because the water is actually pushing through the pool and out the hose still. So what I'm going to do is just tuck the hose up into the pool, just in that spot there. Now it's only going to be until I switch out the actual pump. So I make sure that everything's all done up on the side of the hose here. Just put that clamp back on, which will screw down onto that fitting, making sure that we don't have any water leaking out. So now I'm just slowly readjusting the hoses that are actually going to feed this new pump, making sure I've got everything in the right place, screwed up with all those gaskets installed. And just slowly getting the old pump out of the way, so just slowly moving it across, moving the hoses with it, and that way we give ourselves some more room to do this. And I've tucked the hoses away as far as I can. Now the intake of the pump on the new pump is actually very similar setup, where you've got the two plastic clear hoses going into a T-piece. So we're making sure that we're doing all those fittings up tight at the moment with those clamps. And then I'm going to do the same setup where I switch across one hose at a time, but making sure that the other one is tucked up higher than the pool so all the water doesn't rush out. Now at the same time, making sure that the fittings that are inside the pool actually have that plastic covering it so that the water doesn't rush out as much as well. And that way, once we change this over, I haven't lost much water. Now that I've taken the old pump away and all the hoses, it's nice and neat, and this is how it should be set up. So now that we've got it set up properly, I can unscrew the drain port and make sure that we go through the process of draining the sand filter and backwashing it, and that way it actually sets the pool up ready to be filtered properly. So make sure you look through the manual and actually work out the process you're supposed to follow, because that way you want to make sure that the filter's working correctly. As you can see, when you turn it on, it actually pumps quite a bit of water. So just make sure that you've got nothing in the way. Or if you want to, you can attach the drain fitting onto the end of that drain port, which is basically just a hose fitting. And that way you can actually connect it to a hose, drain it out onto your lawn, and that way you don't have water spraying everywhere. But that just depends on how you've got your pump set up. And there we have it, the pool pump's been upgraded with a new pool and sand filter combo. Make sure you keep the pool topped up with water, because you do lose some when you do the installation and actually flush the pool pump. But that's about it from me. Hopefully this has helped. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Watch the other videos. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.